Welcome to Next Round with me, Dale McDermott.
And me, David W. Higgins.
A young Irish look at the economy, politics and society.
Covering home and abroad.
For the thinkers, the dreamers and the doers, this is Next Round. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Next Round. Today, we want to talk about a number of pieces of data which have been released with respect to corporate tax receipts, wider income tax receipts for the economy, all showing record numbers for us, GDP, unemployment, inflation. All of this then leads to a conversation about what do we do with this money? Do we save it? Do we spend it? And what are the implications for the wider economy? We also want to talk about housing. So Sinn Féin have released its long-awaited housing policy, a long, over 100-page document which details what they want to do and sets out their policy perspective on housing, which was much awaited, and we want to talk about that as well. If you do like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to us. We are available on all major podcast platforms. You can also watch our podcast where we're available on YouTube. And also please like, share, and subscribe to our channel there. David, good to see you. Summer is well and truly over. For those watching, you'll see that I have a light on in my background, which shows that it's a dark and dreary, rainy day here in London, and summer swiftly came to an end.
Yeah, it's dark here as well. Dale, we're recording this at 8 a.m. in the morning, and we don't have the bright summers that we used to, or the bright evenings, but that's how it goes in seasons.
I'm not in shorts now, and it's it quickly changed. But with that, one thing that hasn't changed, David, has been how well we have been doing from a corporate tax perspective. And so we had a bunch of data this week being released. And corporation tax receipts, first of all, for August, doubled compared to last year, driving up government revenue by over 40% to 7.4 billion euro during the month. In particular, on corporation tax, that increased by 1.9 billion euro to 3.7 billion, which was a staggering 108.7% increase. So we've seen, corporation tax very much hold its own in recent periods of time. Income tax as well, increasing steadily. And the whole question then around, how is Ireland's tax position meant to go forward? Because I think, David, one of the questions that has been raised over the last number of years, and with the OECD very much having its hawkish eye on Ireland, and with global agreement to increase that from 12.5% to the new agreed OECD standard of 15%, the question was, what effect will that have on Ireland's corporate tax receipts? And the answer is that Ireland still expects its corporate tax receipts to boom. And there was an article this week in the Financial Times, David, which really talked about this broader issue then for Ireland, which is the abundance of riches that we're currently in now, and the luxury of having the 8.6% surplus, and continuing that surplus on the accounts for the country for the foreseeable future. And even with corporate tax receipts being stripped out, the actual natural deficit in the economy and in the budget is also slowly decreasing as well. So much progress has been made, I think, on Ireland's financial position. It's a far cry from 10 years ago when we were an economy very much in the pigs category. We were an economy that was in an IMF program. And the question now turns to, what do we do with this? I know on this podcast, David, we've talked about, the macro issues of infrastructure and housing and how we need to invest in that in order to really unlock Ireland's potential going forward. And in fact, you are at launch this week, David, I believe, with a new think tank in Ireland, which is called Progress Ireland, which is looking at a bunch of these issues. So curious to know, how was that?
Yeah, so Progress Ireland it's everything you said there is a great backdrop to this think tank launching, because with such a large surplus, deciding how you spend it and to spend it efficiently and effectively really matters. So Progress Ireland is set up by a guy called Sean Keys, who used to be a writer at the Currency, but with three others, and there's four of them who are working full time on this project. They've received a mix of different funding, but one of them is the Collison brothers of the Stripe fame. And the think tank is
who are a great Irish success story to be called out.
Indeed. But it seems it's very clear that they too feel that there are problems in the Irish economy and planning system and everything that need addressing. But think tanks aren't something that come on the scene too often in Ireland. If I think back to the last decade, the one which was more recent was the Hibernia Forum, set up by a guy, Eamon Delaney, and they were much more firmly centre right. They were pushing for things like deregulation, tax cuts, that sort of thing. They were almost kind of a last gasp of the Progressive Democrats in a way, even. Yeah, but that fizzled out. They didn't kind of make it or sustain themselves as a lasting think tank. You also have NERI, the Nevin Economic Research Institute, taking a little more left-wing approach on things. But the pitch from Progress Ireland is that they are very much in the centre. They are interested in listening to the best of the left and the best of the right. So, best of the left in housing will get you a city like Vienna, but the best of the right will get you somewhere like a city in Texas, each of which can deliver housing in quite effective ways, and is known for either being cheap in the market or being effective on the state delivery, and that you can learn from both of those essentially. So the principles that they outline, and the launch was very much at first just about outlining who they are, what they're, what are the issues they care about. They care about housing, infrastructure, and innovation. Their housing policy is going to come out a little later, I think into next week. They were saying at the launch, but the thing that they did launch with was an analysis of the Metro project. The Metro is going to be one of the biggest. This is Metro to the airport. One of the biggest spending projects that the state takes on in the coming years, and the project could cost anywhere between about 10 billion and 25 billion. It's going to be a mammoth project. But what they do in a piece that they've published on their website is they look through kind of similar metro projects around the world and looking at the cost per kilometre of building them. And the risk is that Ireland is going to end up on the higher end of comparison to other countries. But
I don't think that will surprise many listeners, given our track record.
No, not at all. But the analysis that they put out is that really the English speaking world, English speaking countries have an infrastructure problem, a cost problem, whereby costs tend to overrun, but that mainland Europe and Asian countries tend to be better per kilometre at building metro lines. And the conclusion they come to here is basically that the reason they cost so much is that Ireland tends to have to hire outside expertise abroad for the duration of these projects, but we actually don't keep those people in house. Mm-hmm. So the key advocacy they're calling for here is to say, look, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, TII, they should be made a semi-state body, and that they should be hiring in-house expertise, tunnel experts, quantity surveyors, all the different people, engineers that are needed to build these projects, and that by having them in-house, that you don't need to be hiring them for each project, that you have them to deploy for any given project at any given time. And I think that speaks to...
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because I think a New Zealander was hired as the project director for for Metrolink. It was Sean Sweeney was hired, I think, earlier on this year to take up the position, um, which I think, I mean, the reality though is that like that's all well and good, but you know, for a country like Ireland, taking on its first metro project, it's going to need to look abroad to look at best practices to deliver it efficiently, right?
It is. So I guess you could say, oh well, you're going to have to hire abroad anyway, for sure. You're probably going to be hiring people who are based abroad. But the argument here is that, oh, even from this project and thereon, you should really be then keeping those
Yeah.
people more permanently hired within your state, within your state hiring, and the idea being that they will then build knowledge expertise over the decades into these state bodies like TII, and that they will then be in a better position. You know, when we talk about other tunneled projects, if you want to do a second metro line, if you needed to do another tunnel that will be a road link, if you need to do it in other cities, that you then have that permanent expertise to draw upon. And the same will be true for building more Lewis lines, more rail links between cities. The idea being that you just make it more permanent, to have that knowledge there.
Mariana Mazzucato, who is a big thinker in this area, professor, one of the top universities here in the UK, the name of which exactly that is escapes me right now, but has authored a book called The Big Con and actually speaks to this point, which is about how does public sector retain the private sector knowledge that it actually procures regularly through external consultancies. And it's this whole piece around how can we kind of build the mind of the public sector versus constantly hiring it and not actually knowledge transferring it then internally. One of the points, it's a really good book to read. I'd recommend it for people to give it a read. But it just speaks about how over the decades, as public sector has hired in external management consultants, how they become really dependent on it, but actually almost then have a drone-like mentality to it, where they just constantly need to live by them in order to survive, which speaks to how we really haven't upscaled the public service over the last number of decades.
Yeah, like I think this also ties in with the idea of the government creating a minister or ministry for
Infrastructure,
infrastructure.
yes.
Yeah, now I'm more on the side of, look, you should actually just be building up all the separate government departments to have infrastructure at their
Yeah.
core. That to me, I think is more impactful. And this kind of speaks, this idea from Progress Ireland speaks to that too, which is that not just within a department, let's say Department of Transport within it, but actually within a commercial semi-state body, um, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, that they would build up that expertise. But it's all part of the same idea. Instead of going to private consultants all the time, you just have it deployable at any given time. And it's really a bet on more of these projects coming along, because 40 years ago, uh, well, maybe there were people talking then about just the fact that we didn't have a rail into the airport, but the specifics
Mm-hmm.
of a metro and underground project really weren't on the agenda. And if you fast forward 40 years from now, there may be a bunch of extra infrastructure projects that just aren't in our thinking now, that will arise, that will need this expertise. So deploying it is the right thing. Now, this again, going back to the whole, is this left, is this right? Basically creating a new state body just isn't traditional,
No.
right wing approach to these kind of things. You wouldn't have had the Hibernia Forum calling for this sort of policy, right?
No.
But I think that speaks to how, okay, again, we're trying to take best of left, best of right. But I'm thinking also of that idea that's out there by the housing commentator Rory Hearn, to have a state house building body. But the thing I would distinguish here is that house building. The way we do it in Ireland is we actually go to the approved housing bodies. We get them to go out and find house builders, and they'll go off and build the projects. And it's about having entities that really specifically care about the need. So in a way, our approved housing bodies are kind of like semi-state way of doing that. I think that model works quite well. Okay, notwithstanding some problems with the likes of Peter McVerry, but the other ones are are charities, and if people are in a charitable cause, they can really care about it. But having this body, I think, is more of a sensible one, because right now, clearly the model that we get to deliver infrastructure is quite costly. That actually going for semi-state in this realm could be quite a cost saver, whereas in the housing realm, if you went for a semi-state thing, it might just balloon and blow out the costs.
Yeah, well, calling for more semi-states is it's a far cry from when we were cutting quangos a number of years ago, which I know was a pretty popular political position to be in.
And then we didn't cut quangos, Dale.
Might have grown them actually. But it's interesting. Two thoughts which comes to mind, which is of course the problem in the Anglosphere on how are they delivering major public projects. Paris, I think, is a good example where they most recently were able to build a metro tunnel going right through the city. And they delivered it at a significant cost less than comparatively to other examples of major similar projects across the Anglosphere in New York, in Toronto as well, where they're currently building and tunneling through the city, which is also seen costs spiral a bit. And then
Dale, sorry, just on the Paris one. So this is the Paris new 11 line.
Yeah.
The extension cost $223 million per kilometer. So that's just a fifth of $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
New York's Fifth Avenue subway extension cost $4.2 billion per kilometer.
Right.
So it was nearly 20 times the cost in an English-speaking country compared to what they did in Paris.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. The differences here can be sizable.
Now, of course, different geographies as well, different type of bedrock and all, but that is just an excuse, I would argue. But then I think the other piece, David, just you mentioned about problems. Kind of foresight really is the problem. Is the issue here? 40 years ago, were we thinking of this? No, we weren't. With respect to critical infrastructure, and therefore, right now, given that we have the benefit of this abundance of riches, as I've called out already, what do we do with this money, and how do we spend it strategically so we're enabled and set up for success over the next 40 years? We're talking right now about a Metrolink to the airport. I mean, one thing which I was actually happy to see, and this is actually being spurred more by private development than actual state strategic thinking, which is, well, do we need more airport capacity? And I know there's a debate right now about Dublin Airport and its passenger cap limit and how that might affect the economy going forward. But I know private development has also been focusing on, well, does Dublin need in its outer ring another airport? And I know there's talks of one being developed in Wicklow, an international airport. Similar to major cities, again, look at London. London has, 4 or 5 airports all in its ring road. Dublin has one, and maybe that's not enough, especially as we look towards the next 40 years.
Yeah, that cap is certainly going to begin encouraging those kinds of discussions. Even geographically, if you're in the kind of Wicklow-Wexford corridor, your options really are to go all around the M50 to the Dublin Airport, or you got to try and go west across to Cork or Shannon. So having one there could be quite strategic. Now, finding the land for it, I mean, Wicklow County Council are notoriously difficult to try and build a single unit of housing. So I might say, good luck trying to build an airport down there, but maybe something further west into Kildare or parts of South County Dublin could be where you'd be able to find or kind of West County Dublin is where you'd be able to find the right spot for it. But yeah, all of this is going to come along when you have the passenger cap. I mean, we already have now signals from Ryanair warning that we could be all paying 500 quid. Well, you, Dale, because you've got to fly home from London for Christmas, you could be paying 500 quid for your ticket.
Yeah.
And they're putting on extra.
I actually had a mini heart attack, by the way, during the week when I read about that. So I actually looked at flights. I'm actually notoriously bad at booking flights. So I'm trying to work on myself and improve that. So I actually looked at flight prices, like very close to Christmas, and actually not that bad. So
right now, I mean, this is like Brown Thomas putting up the Christmas decorations, I mean, people start saying, "Gosh, don't be thinking about Christmas just yet."
Oh, it's already
But
started,
so,
David. We're only like 11 weeks to Christmas. It's actually pretty soon.
uh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, okay. You've made me feel a little old now. Um, but one of the mitigations for this is that Ryanair, I think, and other airlines are putting extra flights on in Belfast,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
so that you fly to Belfast and get the bus down.
I mean, and you know, how long is the drive from Dublin to Belfast Airport? Like about 90 minutes, 2 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
about that.
but
No
I
traffic.
mean,
Yeah,
like if you're on a bad day, like let's say again, I'm in central London here. If I'm driving in rush hour, let's say to Heathrow, oh my god, on a bad day that could be like an hour 45. So it's
yeah,
actually not too dissimilar from a timing perspective. But then like that question then on um, I mean, to me, my immediate reaction to those possible objections on what I see as critical state infrastructure, it's very Irish. You know, are we actually saying that we're an island?
yeah.
This is really basic stuff. We're an island off the coast of Europe. Um, are we really saying that the something that can have a real economic effect on the productivity and income of the overall economy and attractiveness for the overall economy will be beholden by a county council? Uh, I think there's a bigger play here for national government. And national government has a role in planning and has a role, I think, in approving planning when the state deems certain critical infrastructure to be of national importance. And I don't think we should be beholden to regional, local authorities when the bigger national story is at play here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ministers should
Housing,
have the right.
housing is also a part of that. But I think I know Owen Murphy tried to do this when he was housing minister as well. But I don't think we went far enough.
Yeah, yeah. In both those cases, it's where ministers should have the right to come in and basically just knock down the door of county council saying, "Sorry, guys, we get why you've done this cap. We get why you're not building housing or whatever the issue is. But I'm the minister. We just had an election or whatever the case may be, and it's their right to release bottlenecks in the economy because that's what these are." And whilst there might be, overflow to the airports, the first instance, as I said, Belfast actually takes you outside the jurisdiction. It leads you much further away from Dublin. And any extra capacity from a second airport in Dublin is going to take years to come on. So you're going to end up with a choked economy for the next couple of years if you have that passenger cap. So absolutely, there should be the right of a minister to come knocking and say, "Sorry, guys, this cap needs to lift."
But I think then tying all of this back then to our original point, which is, that article in the Financial Times this week spoke about, the surplus challenge facing the economy. And I think, a think tank and an organization like Progress Ireland, I think it's really timely because, as a nation, bringing together ideas and thought perspectives, especially internationally on critical things like infrastructure, housing, but how we as a country spend money. In the article, it rightly pointed out, for example, the National Children's Hospital, still not opened, set to cost 2.24 billion, which is a staggering 4 times over the initial budget and is significantly delayed. And it's not scheduled to open until next year at the very earliest. There's also then, I think, a question here around public confidence. Would the public vote for and therefore allow politicians to ring fence and earmark money, public money, for big major projects in the economy? It's just something that gives me pause when, as we move towards election season, which there'll be one now in the next 2 or 3 months. What will the public reaction be to political parties advocating for multi-billion-dollar public-driven projects? We'll talk about Sinn Féin in a moment. They're advocating for 39 billion to be spent on on housing. Will the public have the confidence that money like that in those vast figures will be delivered efficiently on time, given the fact that we've just spent the last 25 minutes talking about how we haven't been able to do that and how other governments in the Anglosphere can't spend money efficiently and effectively?
I think people are going to be are certainly going to feel cynical about these things. I mean, looking at the Leinster House bike shelter, which has been a major story in
Oh my God,
in the past week. You know, you can build a home for less than they spent on that shelter.
Did you see Senator Michael McDowell? He wrote an article on his website during the week. I'm not sure if you read it, but he basically just goes to town on analyzing the cost receipts for that, and I think including, I think it was like €10,000 on archaeological work. The fact that what it was actually built on tarmac. So I think if they're able to tarmac over it, you know, the whole point was, well, why the hell did they spend €10,000 basically looking at a piece of tarmac?
Yeah, I think they had to dig under it to check for archaeology stuff. Now, the 10 out of the overall 335 is actually quite small. It's the main bulk of the money has gone on the unspecified shelter itself, and there isn't a further breakout of that, and that's where the key clues are going to be. Okay, who had that contract? What were their materials and labor costs? In the round for it, were there extra checks they had to do because of its location?
Yeah,
it's not so clear that there. Yeah, I mean, like, I'd imagine whoever had this contract didn't have significant extra work, or at least ones that don't run to the cost of a house. But back to your general point, Dale, yeah, like, people are going to be, I think, quite cautious about seeing these plans and then thinking, oh gosh, it's just going to be another cost overrun. But during the 2000s, Ireland built a lot of our roads in and around budget or under budget. We have done big infrastructure before, particularly when we got the good rhythm of it going. Roads did used to actually, I think I remember some of the earlier road projects in the 80s and 90s, I think, were a bit over budget, but then we got good at it, and then we started building lots of motorways and it became under budget. So I hope we'd get there on rail and metro and Lewis and all of that as well. But that might be where having a good structure behind it really matters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think good time now, Dave, maybe to turn to where one political party in Ireland wants to spend a lot of money as well, which is Sinn Féin. So Sinn Féin earlier this week launched its housing policy. Some major items, just want to run through some pieces here, including proposing the abolition of a stamp duty for first-time buyers on homes worth less than €450,000. The party also proposed the creation of a new public housing fund that would effectively pay for all of the land-related costs for a home buyer, estimated at about €100,000. So it's quite a detailed document. It's 112 pages, and it outlined Sinn Féin's proposal to spend 39 billion to facilitate the delivery of about 300,000 new homes between 2025 and 2030. Of course, that is in the backdrop of the Housing Commission, which says that today we have a deficit of about 220,000. David, correct me, was that for 2022 or was that for this year?
No, that was as of 22. Correct. So yes, that deficit is even bigger, higher. Yeah. You fast forward 2 years, that deficit's grown.
So it's interesting. So again, those are the headlines. The big piece. Some of the big piece items just to call out here is with respect to, this in terms of who is actually eligible for this. So the big piece here is, first of all, I think what the big differentiator from Sinn Féin is really about this whole, how do we make it affordable for people? And what they're proposing basically is that the state would pay for all of the land-related costs in order to make accessing the purchasing of a house that bit much easier. They, of course, say then that the state will do that, and that they will be able to take that. The problem then is, well, what's the implications for that? It's a bit of a restricted market in one capacity then, because what it means is that when a purchaser then enters this almost subsidized purchase of a home, they then have to basically enter a legally binding contract with the state, which means that the property cannot be rented out to the private market going forward. And when the owner sells the home, they then have to sell it to another affordable, eligible purchaser at the time. So it actually can't go out then to the wider private market. It is more restricted. Now, the question here is, one, what does that mean then for, well, the value of the home itself? Because it's effectively not accessible to the wide free market. It is only accessible on the restricted front. And then two, one of the questions here is then, will the wider financial service sector and those who are actually providing mortgages buy into this? And actually one of the points which has been commentated by those who are poking holes in this policy is actually that those who are actually providing mortgages may not actually agree or fund mortgages on homes like this, period. The broader question then really is on land. Now, look, I will actually give credit to Sinn Féin on thinking creatively here, because what they're trying to do is make it accessible to people without actually, at least in the headline, trying to lower the cost of the home. They were slapped on the hand earlier on this year when they wanted to actually lower the price of homes, which I don't think is electorally beneficial for them. So what they're trying to do here is just separate the actual cost of the home with the land. But Glenveagh, the property developer, have come out earlier on this week and also gave some credit to Sinn Féin on thinking creatively. And again, this document covers a lot of other stuff around tenant rights and other areas. But the piece around focusing on land, the CEO of Glenveagh said that actually land costs, effectively, according to him, represent a small proportion of the actual finished product. And it's really all the stuff in the middle. It's all the costs related to, the elements around regulation, the elements to deliver the product of a final and finished home. Those are the piece in the middle. And actually the soft costs, such as related to land, are actually not the major problem here. So, David, I think it's an interesting conundrum. Sinn Féin, I think, they're under pressure here to be creative and to differentiate themselves and to be seen as being pro-solution. But my quick reaction is it ambitious enough? The CEO of Glenveagh actually said that he thinks that it's actually not 39 billion euro we should be spending on homes. It's 139 billion euros now. He puts it out of course, given that he has a vested interest in building homes. But then also, this piece around land, I think it's going to be a sticking point for them.
Yeah. So like the overall cost of 39 billion, they say that it's going to be 37 of that is on new builds and just 2 billion for acquisition of homes. And I don't have the numbers to hand for government, but acquisition of homes has been probably a larger part of social housing delivery in recent times, because we've discussed this before on the show, that there are some people who go to bid for a house now and find that a housing body or the county council are actually bidding for homes alongside you.
My brother was one.
Yes, yeah. So taking that lower is one part of their policy, but actually I doubt in the next 5 years they'd be able to get the figure that low, because I think that acquisition of homes is going to have to continue to be a part of a way that the government gets through housing waiting lists it with a steady pace. And it can often be the case that just buying a house gets you it sooner than building one from scratch. But look, every party agrees that you got to also notch higher the pace of at which we're building new homes, both for private market and for social. On the question of having kind of the land and owned by the state. We have this scheme now, which is the shared equity scheme, which has been quite successful, which is being expanded because of how high the take up was. Particularly, a lot of single people went through that scheme. In a way, you you don't fully own the home when the state owns a share of it, which is what the current scheme provides. But you do have the right to go out and sell it in the private market and treat it as if it is a private home. Whereas under the Sinn Féin plan, as you mentioned, you are more restricted. So in a way, look, both sides, the government and Sinn Féin, are trying to approach this problem of cost in slightly nuanced ways. Both basically acknowledging that there's certain cohorts, people in the middle, people on kind of low mid incomes, who even with combined salaries can't afford the full market price for the average home in their area. So this is both of their methods to fill the gap. Essentially, like having ramped up a scheme like the shared equity scheme, I would not then be ramping it lower and winding it down, considering the take up has been high and it's been quite successful. The other one is Help to Buy. I mean, Help to Buy is only available for new homes, but it is a refund on your tax money. Mm-hmm. It supports the viability of new homes, and withdrawing that is probably going to, in the near term, discourage a lot of builders from actually going out and building new properties, because suddenly the price that they can get for them could be a full 30K lower. And I know that kind of speaks to that idea of, well, okay, so all that Help to Buy scheme was doing was actually notching the price higher. But look, the trade-off that you have in the housing system is between cost and viability and numbers. And we have a massive viability and numbers problem, which is to actually encourage scale here, to encourage enough home builders to be out there building, despite all the headwinds, despite higher interest rates have come along, despite the availability of labor has been quite, a problem for them, despite all other costs going up, materials costs and everything else. I mean, the viability of projects is always on a very fine line. And then you have planning. And I guess the planning stuff, there probably is stuff in planning here I just haven't gotten to in the Sinn Féin document. I mean, the big thing that either Sinn Féin or the government need to get to grips with is objections, and whether we end up in the courts with a whole bunch of housing projects. A lot of housing projects through the fast track system that Owen Murphy brought in ended up in planning judicial reviews. That was incredibly costly. Mm-hmm. That has just, killed a bunch of projects that would have otherwise gone ahead. Really, it's going to come down to those kind of reforms, which either party could end up making. I mean, the planning bill is trying to make those changes too. So if you've Sinn Féin coming in then with a new different kind of set of planning after a new regime has just come in, all of this is going to become quite messy. My guess is that Sinn Féin's going to get in. They're going to find a planning bill that's just been brought in. They're going to find shared equity, Help to Buy are already kind of running along, and they're going to find it very hard to actually shut these things down.
Yeah, I mean, in the document they have a section entirely called out with respect to planning, and one of the points which they call out is that they want to review the statute of the Planning and Development Bill 2023 and only progress those elements of the legislation that we believe will improve the planning system. How vague is that? But certainly, I think your point is well made, David, around objections, because anything that ends up in a judicial review or judicial contest, effectively whatever brings the lawyers in is going to increase the costs of this, and the piece around viability just will not happen. That is one point that again the head of Glenveigh said, is that effectively anything that affects the viability of homes means that they simply just will not build them. On the reference around costs as well, just one thing he also called out, which was he said that 20 years ago they were able to deliver own door housing and suburban housing. And now that's really effectively changed, and this reflects kind of market demand, which is that we now have, much higher rise mixed developments, higher density, combined with greater regulations, and that does come at a cost. So again, speaking to that piece around the middle, where he believes that let's focus less on land and more on the other elements. But all of that said, both government and Sinn Féin are really trying to skin the cat just in different ways. And again, it's about making it as accessible as possible. But ultimately, I think the piece here that everyone needs to focus on is just build more houses. And again, I would go back to the point, Sinn Féin's plan here is to build 300,000 over the next 5 years. Is that ambitious enough? I don't think it is.
No, and then you'd have to bucket the 250,000 promised by Simon Harris is also not enough either. So we're probably going to get to 2030, to the subsequent general election, with neither party having fully, let's say adequately, resolved the issue. But look, 5 years is a long time. If the economy hits a hiccup and recession, that tends to lower house prices. That's what the last one did. And look, we could find that the pressures on demand have just abated too, if that were to arise as well. So, look, we could end up in a totally different place. Both parties are going to be running to stand still in some ways and running quite fast to even make minor progress. But, we actually have come, I think, away since this crisis first began in 2016, whereby a construction sector that was building next to nothing is now building a lot. And that is something. And when new homes are built, they're higher quality, they're energy rated, and people get somewhere very cozy heading into those winter months that we discussed at the start of this episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's also, this is not exactly a unique Irish problem. We do see other countries, again, especially in the Anglosphere, that are affected by a housing crisis. But Ireland is very much a unique case, and I think how desperate it has become. With that, I think, David, we're out of time. So let's finish up there. Thank you all for listening and watching. If you did like this podcast, again, we would remind you to please like the podcast, please share it, and please subscribe. We're available on all major podcast platforms to listen to. You can also watch us on YouTube, where, again, we would encourage you to please like, share, and follow our channel. Thanks again for watching and listening, and we will see you again next week.